Putin has already claimed that Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad are supposedly encircled. The Ukrainian side denies this, although it does acknowledge it. The situation there is indeed difficult. Russian assault groups are pushing toward Pokrovsk and are trying with all their might to create chaos in the city. The enemy has also been spotted in Myrnohrad. Logistics are almost paralyzed and enemy drones are monitoring some key routes. The map shows that the pincers are gradually closing in. Analysts warn that the situation is critical, and if clear and swift decisions are not made now, these two cities could be on the verge of falling. Kupiansk is also under pressure. Heavy fighting continues on the outskirts. So what is really happening in each city? Let's figure it out. This is tsn.ua News. I'm Alina Turishin. Subscribe to our channel and give us a like. And now let's get to the main story. The situation in Pokrovsk remains extremely tense and is at the center of attention. The enemy is breaking through to the city, throwing in significant forces. Chief of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces, Valery Rasimov, on October 26th, in a report to dictator Putin, he stated that 31 battalions of the Ukrainian Armed Forces were surrounded in the Pokrovsk direction. In particular, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, this concerns about 5,500 Ukrainian soldiers. Gerasimov noted that the units and military formations of the 2nd and 51st Russian armies, advancing from converging directions, completed the encirclement of the enemy in the Pokrovsk-Myrnohrad area. Putin repeated the same claim. October 29th, the dictator demonstratively proposed to declare a ceasefire for several hours and to bring groups of foreign journalists into Pokrovsk so they could assess the situation themselves. At the same time, Putin stated that Russian troops had encircled Ukrainian forces in Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region. According to the Institute for the Study of War and other analysts, Russia's claims of a complete encirclement are not confirmed. Russian forces continue to advance toward Pokrovsk. However, there is currently no confirmation that Ukrainian units are completely surrounded. The commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, who personally visited this area, also stated on October 30th that reports of the security service of Ukraine being blocked in Pokrovsk as well as in Kupiansk do not correspond to reality. At the same time, he confirmed that the situation is difficult. In Pokrovsk, enemy infantry, avoiding direct clashes, is gathering in urban areas and constantly changing locations, so the primary task is to detect and destroy them. A decision is being made to strengthen the resilience of the defense in the Pokrovsk direction. Syrsky emphasized that he has warned commanders not to allow irresponsibility. For this, I will take strict measures up to and including removal from their positions, he stated. Russia has deployed nearly 11,000 troops in an attempt to encircle the Pokrovsk agglomeration. This was reported by the 7th Rapid Response Corps of the Air Assault Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Some of them managed to infiltrate, that is, to penetrate the city directly with infantry. According to military analysts, this involves about 200 to 300 Russian soldiers. The enemy groups that managed to infiltrate the city aim to advance to the northwest and north of Pokrovsk. A similar figure, about 200 occupiers within Pokrovsk, was mentioned by President Volodymyr Zelensky on October 27th, emphasizing that the city remains under Ukrainian control. According to official data, on October 28th to 29th, Ukrainian defenders eliminated 18 Russian soldiers directly within the city itself. The Corps command also showed on the map the enemy's probable plan to encircle the Pokrovsk agglomeration. The Ukrainian analytical project Deep State describes the situation in Pokrovsk as being on the verge of critical. According to their observations, Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups having infiltrated residential neighborhoods are mining roads and attacking rear units, including scouts, artillerymen, and UAV operators. As of 6 o'clock p.m. on October 29th, the enemy is trying to maintain the pace of their advance by sending small groups of 5 to 10 people into the city. Some of the occupiers have already attempted to break through in the direction of Ryshin. Vyacheslav Lyuty, commander of the Shershny Dovbusha Strike Unmanned Aviation Systems Battalion of the 68th Separate Jaeger Brigade, said on the air of Espresso that situations often arise when the enemy appears in Pokrovsk, in places where Ukrainian soldiers do not expect him, and he targets long-range mortar crews and pilot positions. They have to engage in firefights and repel the enemy, which greatly complicates their work. The enemy also very often disguises themselves in civilian clothing and camouflages themselves. Roman Pohorily, co-founder and analyst of Deep State, said on his YouTube channel that Ukrainian drone operators are already relocating from the city of Pokrovsk because it has become almost impossible to work there. As in general, it is almost impossible to move around, because even moving from point A to point B anywhere in the city, you can run into an enemy infantry ambush. The infiltration of the city is happening from the southern side. According to Pohorily, enemy drone operator positions have already been spotted on the southern outskirts of the city. The analyst says there could already be more than a dozen such positions because the enemy is taking advantage of this opportunity. Currently, the enemy does not control any districts in the city, but at the same time, they are creating chaos. The analyst says that the southern part, where the enemy is infiltrating, needs to be blocked. Analysts from deep state say that the worst part is that the enemy has managed to disrupt logistics toward Myrnograd district and the entire city agglomeration. In addition to infantry ambushes, enemy drones are actively operating, monitoring the area. They are also striking at movements and positions. The intensity of enemy drone flights sharply increased at the moment when infantry began to infiltrate the city. Enemy drones are systematically destroying our logistics, creating conditions for the gradual capture of the city. Analysts warn that it is extremely important to focus efforts on preventing the occupation of a major city, which should serve as a fortress and a significant obstacle for the enemy. It is critically necessary to block the enemy's infiltration routes and carry out a thorough clearing operation with large forces, for example, a full brigade, rather than small groups, including special forces, who on their own will not be able to achieve a lasting result. The situation in Pokrovsk, already on the verge of critical, continues to deteriorate to the point where, by the time everything becomes clear, it may already be too late. The situation is also unstable in peaceful Radia, near Pokrovsk, the spokesperson for the eastern region. On October 28th, Captain Hryhory Shapoval of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported that Russian troops had entered the outskirts of the city. However, on October 29th, the Eastern Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine refuted this information. They stated that Russian troops are not operating within the boundaries of Myrnohrad and that Shapoval was referring to the situation near Pokrovsk. At the same time, volunteer and activist Serhiy Sternenko responded to the statement from the Eastern Military Group, writing that the claim that there are no occupiers in Myrnohrad is a lie. He reminded that the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, recently called for telling the truth about the situation at the front. Sternenko also published a video in which, as he claims, part of the Russian units can be seen, who as of October 29th were in Myrnohrad from the northern side. The volunteer stated that there is no logistical connection to the city by transport. The situation remains extremely difficult, and the false information being spread only makes things worse. Roman Pohorily, co-founder and analyst at Deep State, notes that Myrnohrad is under pressure from all directions. According to him, as of today, it is practically impossible to rotate Ukrainian units. The enemy has already entrenched themselves near the settlement of Rivne. They have effectively cut off the logistical routes to the city. Pohorily emphasizes that this is not just about physical blockade, although Russian infantry are already actively operating in this direction. Enemy drone operators are closely monitoring this area, thwarting any attempts at rotation or delivery of supplies. In this way, the enemy is trying to deprive Ukrainian forces of maneuverability and is gradually creating conditions for complete isolation. Myrnohrad. And a soldier, responding to calls, writes that the situation in the Myrnohrad direction is becoming extremely difficult. The enemy has launched a heavy offensive, ramping up pressure from several directions at once. First of all, the settlement of Balahan has been completely cut off. The enemy has entrenched themselves there and is now trying to advance further. The soldier says that a group of occupiers tried to break through along Sirova Street, reached the district cemetery where they were repelled and suffered losses. Despite this, they continue to press forward, aiming to get closer to the area with apartment buildings, which could become a foothold for new counterattacks. There is also activity being observed from the northeast. There, the Russian army managed to gain a foothold on the outer lines of the private sector and is trying to consolidate its position. All of this together creates a picture of a creeping encirclement, as Myrnograd begins to be squeezed from several directions, with attempts to wear down the defense. Blogger and military correspondent Bohdan Miroshnikov assesses the situation as critical, while emphasizing that there is still no encirclement of the agglomeration. At the same time, logistical support is practically non-existent. This is the result of the enemy's intensive strengthening of its drone component, which has significantly complicated the delivery of reinforcements and resources.
But even under such conditions, our soldiers are, on the whole, handling their tasks very well. The fact that the enemy has infiltrated and spread throughout the entire city does not yet mean they have secured a foothold. Our drone operators are currently working excellently along the routes used for bringing in reinforcements, trying to completely isolate the main enemy forces from those who have infiltrated. This is yielding results, though not 100%. But let's be honest. The enemy has virtually unlimited resources and manpower in the Pokrovsk direction. How long we can continue to defend the agglomeration depends on the level of problems we are able to create for the enemy.
Ukrainian specialist and consultant in military radio technologies Serhiy Bezkresny, known as Flash, adds that the situation with Pokrovsk has been ongoing for quite some time. The Russians, for example, from Bakhmut and other cities know what urban combat against the Ukrainian armed forces is like. This will last a long time and come with losses. That's why they decided to encircle the Pokrovsk agglomeration.
Since we couldn't counter this, we have to take responsibility and have the courage to make unpopular decisions. I believe that nothing is more valuable to us than people. Only the higher command knows what and when to decide as they see the whole picture. For those who don't understand the message, don't waste the guys' lives for the sake of politics and public opinion.
The Russian dictator also claimed that Ukrainian forces are encircled in Kupiansk, Kharkiv region. The Joint Forces Group refuted this information on October 29th. They stated that fierce fighting is ongoing. Russian occupiers are trying to gain a foothold in the northern part of the city. However, there is no talk of any encirclement of Ukrainian troops. The command emphasized that all statements by Russian propagandists about the alleged encirclement of Ukrainian units are not true. They are pure fabrication.
If the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin were not a war criminal, one could almost feel sorry that in his old age he is once again forced to make a fool of himself, and to repeat the lies of his own generals, lies that not even his loyal audience or the Russian elites could believe.
The head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council, Lieutenant Andriy Kovalenko, explains that the show with the new Russian missiles and the fake encirclement of Pokrovsk and Kupiansk. Putin deliberately staged this before the meeting between Trump and Xi Jinping in South Korea. Let me remind you that it took place on October 30th. As the leader of the United States said, they and everyone else talked about Ukraine for a long time. Andriy Kovalenko says that Putin lives in a virtual reality he has created for himself, where he only receives good news. And the pompous statements about the nuclear-powered Burevestnik, the Poseidon that has no analogues, and the supposed encirclement of Ukrainian troops near Kupiansk and Pokrovsk, this is all theater. The dictator talks about imaginary victories to create an illusion of strength and control ahead of the Xi-Trump meeting. The Kremlin wants to show that everything is under control, while in reality, Russia is bogged down in a war with no prospects. Retired Lieutenant General Ihor Romanenko, a leading liaison officer, told TSN.ua that the situation in Pokrovsk is critical. The enemy is pressing from several directions, having advanced to the railway station. The city's streets have turned into zones of fierce fighting. Logistics are under threat. Supply routes are under severe pressure. Rotations are almost impossible. Russian units are trying to close the pincers from the northern and northeastern flanks, creating a real threat of encirclement. A parallel escalation is also being observed in Kupiansk. There, street fighting continues as well, and the enemy is pushing into our positions. The Kremlin is advancing further in the Donetsk region, and the next target could be Kostiantynivka, followed by Drushkivka, Kramatorsk, and Sloviansk, in order to practically seize the entire area, Donetsk region. At the same time, other directions are becoming more active, where assault forces are being gathered. Without significant reinforcements, means of destruction, and coordinated mobilization, the defense will weaken and the situation will continue to deteriorate. If Ukraine does not switch its economy to a wartime footing and does not amend legislation to strengthen responsibility in matters of state defense. Then what do you think? How will events on the front develop further? Write your thoughts below this video. And stay with TSN so you don't miss the main news. See you in the next episodes.